Okay, working on the front suspension here. That was a pain to get out. So I didn't have a puller or anything that could fit on this because of Nissan. So I took a piece of thick wall square tubing, drilled some holes in it, and ran the bolts through that, and I got the bolts as tight as I dared for fear of breaking this piece. And still couldn't get it to come out. I mean, I'm literally crushing the top of it. Well, part of that was also, I had originally tried hammering it out. Yeah, that was never gonna happen. But yeah, I got the bolts as tight as I could, and then I put a whole bunch of heat on it. I mean, I got this part hot enough that I was cooking the grease out of the ball joint, and it still wouldn't come loose. And so I left this with a whole lot of length on it so I could use it as a handle, which worked really good. And I held it with one hand, and with the other hand, I just started whacking on it with the hammer, you know, right here in this area. And it finally came out of there. I'm not sure where I'm replacing these ball joints. I mean, once you get the decades of dirt off of them, I mean, they just look perfectly fine. Okay, this side went way easier than the other side. Just bolted my thing up there again, and then went and hit it in this area, and it popped right out. And yeah, it is in terrible shape. This thing will also do double duty for getting the tie rod out. And there we are. Okay, got the spring compressed where it's loose. And at this point, standing over here or behind this thing are the death areas. So I'm gonna just stay right where I'm at. And now I'm gonna undo that nut and then relax the spring, because there's a whole lot of energy stored up in this thing right now. And I don't know if it makes a difference. It makes me feel better, but I backed both tools off kind of incrementally. I didn't take one all the way off and then take the other one all the way off, because I didn't want all the load of the spring just acting on one of those. So I undid them both kind of slowly. I'm attempting to rebuild one of the front struts, and I didn't know what size this nut was, so I just went with the biggest adjustable I have. And it was kind of touch and go. I hit it with penetrating oil and then just worked. I got it to move a little bit, and then I just kept working it back and forth, and I finally just got it freed up. So now that I should be able to unscrew this cap without stripping anything, I can get this shock out of it and then keep cleaning stuff. I totally could have gotten some more miles out of these. In fact, I might just put these right back in. And there we are. A completely destroyed shock, but the good old slide hammer got it out. Okay, so I'm attempting to put this back together. I think I forgot to mention, if you take that nut off and you don't have the spring compressed, you're probably gonna kill yourself. Or at the very least, something really exciting is gonna happen. But yeah, so I got that compressed, and I was trying to make sure. Okay, I was trying to make sure that I was getting all this put back together right. And I guess more evidence that this car has had some Dukes of Hazzard like shenanigans. Originally, that part of the subframe was all completely caved in as though it hit the ground. The fenders aren't on it, but the bottoms of the fenders were all pushed in as though they hit the ground. The front valence and everything on the front underside of the car was destroyed. And I was looking at this exploded diagram, and it showed a bump stop in there. But there was no bump stop in there. So I guess whatever they did, they bottomed it out bad enough that they completely blew the rubber bump stop out of it. All right, I got my name brand Strut Rebuilding Center going. And so the book said to put in 9.3 ounces of oil. So all that oil that was coming out of this earlier, so yes, part of that was from the original shock whenever I took it apart, because this is how it came apart whenever I pulled on it. But a lot of that oil was supposed to be in there, and it wasn't for the shock. So the shock has its oil in it, and then it sits in the strut, but the shock is considerably smaller diameter than the diameter of the strut. So what they did is, well, one, it had a little bit of grease on the bottom of it, so I put some grease on the bottom of this one too, just so it doesn't wear a hole in the bottom of anything. But so all that oil is in there to transfer heat out of the shock and to the housing of the strut. So that's why all that oil was in there. Now, the book said to use 9.3 ounces of oil for the original style one, but in reality, using these, let's see, it says KYB XLG is the brand and type of these front inserts that I'm putting in. They're a much bigger diameter than the original ones, so it only ended up taking about an ounce and a half of oil. I have the washer sitting on here, and I'm assuming it's supposed to be concave down, since this has a bit of a taper on the inside of it to match that. So that's about to go on. Oh, for the oil type, it just said a strut specific oil, and I've never even seen or heard of that, so I didn't think I could get my hands on it. Everybody else on the internet seems to just use regular motor oil. So I went with the 0W20 type, full synthetic. So I figure a thinner weight oil will transfer heat better, and it's a synthetic, so it shouldn't break down over time. So now I just got to put the nut on and put it all back together. All right, I'm not sure what the torque spec is, and it doesn't matter because I don't have a socket or anything to go over that. But I got it pretty snug with the old adjustable, to the point that I rounded 2 of the corners off, so that's probably tight enough. And then doubly helpful is the old shock body is the perfect diameter to fit over that for leverage. So you can put one hand there, put a foot there, and then put some torque to it. I don't know if you can see the oil right there in the strut, probably about 1/8 of an inch below the threads, but 1.5 ounces, or maybe closer to 1 3/4 ounces, ended up being the magic number. Okay, so finally got my boots to put the front struts back together, and this is something that I was remaking because the original one was just hugely negative and I didn't like it. So now that I've had a day to calm down and reflect a bit on the fact that I could have bought a Camaro instead of buying a Nissan, this boot doesn't even come close in any dimension, shape, or form to fitting on this car. Worse still, the quality is horrific. This isn't rubber. So this is the original one, and the original one is rubber, actual rubber. This one is plastic, and in my attempt to make it work, I put just a little bit of heat to it with the heat gun, and it completely melted and deformed and was ruined. So that's pretty much solid proof that this is in fact plastic, because you put a bunch of heat to this one and nothing happens. And I ended up calling the Nissan dealer, and I had never called them before about parts for this car because on their website, if any part for this car, it just says that it's discontinued. But I thought, what the heck? I called about this one, and they were able to find, I think there was only 2 in my state that they were able to find. But yeah, so there was the part number for them. And they've been around for a little bit. They're dated 2013. But they are the correct boot, which is all that matters. And it's actually rubber. So these cost about twice as much as these ones, but it was money well spent because they're actually going to do what they're supposed to do. All right, got the new ball joint in. It moves a whole lot better than the old one. But aftermarket parts strike again. I had to reuse the nut from the old ball joint, because this one is a bigger diameter, but that really isn't the problem. The problem is this one is considerably shorter than the original one. And so when I torqued this one all the way down, the cotter key would have just been dancing around on top of the nut, not even in one of the grooves. So couldn't use that. But yeah, so I just put the original one back in, new cotter key, torqued it down. This one, for it to line up, was on the lower torque spec. The max torque spec would not get it past this groove, so it's at 71 foot-pounds. And I'm just getting all these torque specs from just I think it's one of those Chilton books for all the Z's, 240, 260, 280, 300. But yeah, so there's that, ready to go. All right, so this specifically was the manual I've been using. It's my paperweight. And it was doing real good on info, but it was missing the torque spec for these bolts that it talks about right here. These guys. But I found someone on the internet who said, I don't know what they found it in a book, and it was 55 to something foot-pounds, I think. Anyways, I did it at 65 and put some Loctite on them. So I think anything like that doesn't have a cotter key, I'm gonna put Loctite on just in case. Makes me feel better. But anyways, so this one's all back together. Gotta get some zip ties for that, and then put all the wheel bearings on it after it's in the car. Working on the next strut. I think I forgot to mention, up here in the I guess between the upper spring retaining deal and the top of the strut, there is a bearing in here. It has a dust cap on it that goes on the underside. And on both sides, I did pull this out and clean it, shot a bunch of brake clean in it to break up the old grease. Got all the old grease out of it, and I sat there for probably 10-15 minutes and completely packed it full of new wheel bearing grease. So both bearings are cleaned and ready to go. Well, I just feel cheated. They didn't send me a cotter key in this one. They forgot to pack it in. Now I gotta break into the generations old cotter key jar. Thing's practically a family heirloom at this point. So it'd probably be a good idea to get some kind of book, or ideally the factory service manual for this stuff, because I guess they were changing parts around quite a bit, because 70 to 78, you torque the ball joint to 40 to 55 foot-pounds, but then this car, which falls in the 79 and later, you torque to 71 to 80 foot-pounds. So I guess just be wary about, just Googling torque specs for any 280Z, because depending on what year 280Z, you might actually end up with the wrong torque spec. All right, so I got sloppy, made a mistake. So whenever I took this side apart, I just took all the bolts and threw them in a box and then labeled it driver's side. And what I have been doing is putting bolts back where they go. As I take stuff apart, put the bolt back, and then you know where it went. For whatever reason, didn't do that on this side, and I made a mistake. Those two bolts there. These ones are for holding the caliper on, and I tried to install these, and I dug the shoulder of it into the outer threads here, and so I had to go buy a tap and die. Cleaned up the threads on these bolts because they were galled up whenever I took them out, and then ran a tap through and cleaned out the threads in there, so that's all good now. Whoops. That's better. I did technically reuse this lock nut, but I put some Loctite on the threads too, so it should all be good. Boots, I'm just using some heavy-duty zip ties to hold them on because that's how the factory had it. And I'm putting the head of the zip tie on the back of the strut so you can't see them. Okay, I'm taking this rear strut apart since the front struts are completely on hold until I can figure out the boot situation. First thing that I've noticed that I'm making a note of is the spring is directional. You notice the bottom is different than the top. So this part where this surface is kind of on a smooth plane, like it's ground down as opposed to being left complete like that. So it's ground down so that it fits on the flat surface of that end of the strut. So that would be the top, that would be the bottom. Okay, so the first one of these I did just popped right in. Also, they came in silver and I masked off the sticker and painted them black, and I think they look a whole lot better like that. But anyway, so the first one popped right in, no issues. This one, I don't know, it just wasn't lined up properly for whatever reason. So clamped one end in the vise, and I just got a wrench on there like that, and then put the cheater pipe over it, and it put a little leverage on it and got this part up here to slip on the top of the spring, because this end is locked in. It's not going to slide. But I got this end to rotate a little bit so that everything will line up. But I just couldn't do it in the car like this. I had to take it out and redo it. The other thing that I think is giving me problems, and there was no instructions with this, but this end has a taper to it and this end does not. So I'm thinking this is the end that the bolt goes on. So I had to rotate it around even more to get it to where this was the side that was going on first. I think I'm gonna just take the hood off because that is an accident waiting to happen.